Hey bookworms, I have a confession to make. Not only am I a huge bookworm, I'm also a massive movie fan. If you're anything like me, you know how frustrating it is to go to the cinema and watch a movie based on a book you've read. Most times, you will be disappointing. But every now and then, Hollywood managed to surprise us and bring back to life a great book with a great movie. So I decided today to share with you my top 10 best and worst book-to-movie adaptations. That means I'm going to take 5 best movie adaptations and worst 5 movie adaptations. This was not an easy list to make, let me tell you that. And please remember, people, this is my opinion. You may disagree, and that's absolutely fine. I'm only human eventually, and remember that I only had 5 places to each category. That was difficult. So let's begin. Let's start with the worst first so we can save the best for last. Would that be strange if I told you that it took me a lot longer to prepare this list than the other one? Maybe because Hollywood is kind of known to butcher books when they are being made into films, but these top 5 really made me angry. They really offended me in a way. I mean, I recently watched 2 very bad movies based on books, Paranoia and Child 44, and as much as Child 44 annoyed me because it was a really good book and I actually stopped watching Paranoia in the middle, they won't enter this list because these top 5 are reserved to books that were really special to me and the movie ruined the meaning of it or something. Okay, enough blabbering, let's start, and the first one is something that I really need to get out of my system before we get to the others. The first one on the list is the Harry Potter series, written by J.K. Rowling and directed by many directors. I grew up reading the Harry Potter books because when I was a kid they actually just came out. The characters were kind of like friends to me in a way. And then the first movie came, and recently, I don't know what sort of masochism came over me, but I decided to rewatch it. Oh my god, that was so horrible. The Harry Potter movies were made without every bit of respect to the source material. And they also didn't make a lot of sense. They didn't think it was important. That's why when people saw the movie when they didn't read the book, they didn't understand part of it. The movie makers didn't think it was important enough to create a coherent story because obviously everyone read the book and everyone knows the story. So instead, they focused on way too long Quidditch games and choose pretty faces to play the characters that remotely resemble the characters in the book. And shall I even start talking about the bad acting? They took Maggie Smith and Alan Rickman to play in those movies. But gee, who was the genius that thought that casting Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson was a good idea? They were terrible. Okay, guys, I can spend an entire day talking about how bad the Harry Potter movies were. So let's just move on. The second book is also a fantasy book for the younger reader and also a book that was very important to me and close to me as a child. And this is The Neverending Story by Michael Ende, and the movie was directed by Wolfgang Petersen. If you haven't read the book, I won't spoil it for you, but let's just say that the book is pretty much divided into 2 parts. In the middle, something very big happens that changes everything and takes the second half of the book to a completely different direction. Too bad that in the movie, we only see the first half, and that's where the movie ends. Moreover, this first half is being told in a completely non-accurate way, in a way that changes the entire message of the story, the whole point, and the reason that the hero is making this journey is being altered. And yes, I know that there is a sequel and it's probably telling the story of the second half of the book, but still, that's not an excuse to finish the first movie the way it did, in a way that makes us think that that's the ending. It simply wasn't. The third book is not a fantasy, it's a drama written by an author whom I'm in love with his writing, Michael Chabon. And this book is called The Mysteries of Pittsburgh. And the movie was directed by Rawson Marshall Thuber, something like that. In the book, it's a beautifully written story about a young man who goes back to his hometown for school. And it's about a relationship with his father, it's about friendship, and in my opinion, it's mostly about how while he is dating a girl, he also finds himself falling in love with a guy. This is a great LGBT-related book because it deals with self-discovery, and the protagonist Art often trying to find out what and who he is and try to find out where he fits in the rainbow scheme, which is not a very easy thing to do. Unfortunately, the movie makers decided that this sexual discovery narrative is apparently not important enough, and therefore the character of Arthur, the man who the protagonist falls for, does not exist in the film. And instead we see Art, the protagonist, yes, Art and Arthur, it's a little complicated, but we see Art, the protagonist, having this strange affair with another male character, one that in the book is completely straight. And it's important that their relationship is only friendship and there's nothing sexual there. And anyway, the movie in itself is absolutely terrible. I met enough people who only saw the movie without reading the book and they also said it was absolutely terrible. We're back to fantasy, and this time it's Stardust by Neil Gaiman. The movie was directed by Matthew Vaughn. Many people who've seen this movie actually really liked it, but I hated it so much I stopped in the middle. Honestly, I don't remember the little details. It's been a while, but I remember that they changed completely the entire story. And the movie was bad, which is a shame because as you can see, it's the movie cover and we have Michelle Pfeiffer and Robert De Niro there, and his character, by the way, is completely ridiculous. It's too bad. The book was really great, but the movie, for me at least, was terrible. The last book on this list, it's by an author whom I think every single book of his was turned into a movie. No, not John Grisham, Stephen King, and hint hint, his name will also appear in the other list, but no spoilers. For this list of the worst movie adaptations, I want to mention one of the only book of Stephen King that I really liked, and this is It. It is a truly scary book about, well, scary things. But it's also a journey. It's about a group of kids who fight this evil clown that represent scare and evil, and as adults they come back together to finish him off once and for all. And as much as I love Tim Curry and I liked his portrayal of Pennywise, the movie was just bad. I'll make it quick. I don't have the book with me, but it's about, I don't know, this thick? How can you expect to put all of this book, which pretty much has two plots or two timelines, in one movie? This movie absolutely butchered the book, really. It took so much of it that all we're left with was this flavorless half-plot. Shame. Okay, after I'd made myself angry by remembering those awful movies, let's move on to the top 5 best movies that were based on books. You will notice that some of the movies in here did not earn their place because they're super accurate, but actually because they took the book into a completely different direction, but did it well. And before we start with the list itself, I do have one cheat entry because it's not exactly a movie. They're making a movie out of it right now, but it didn't really count, but I still wanted to share it with you. And that's Wicked by Gregory Maguire, and I actually didn't really like the book. It's a different point of view. It tells the story of the Wicked Witch of the West from the Wizard of Oz story. And they made it into a Broadway musical, which was fantastic. And now they're making a movie out of it. But I knew it didn't really count and it couldn't be on the 5 list. So I cheated a little bit, but now to the actual 5. I'll start this list with Stephen King again to even out the previous list. And this time I want to talk about his book The Green Mile, which was directed by Frank Darabont. Now, before you start mentioning The Shawshank Redemption, I will tell you that I haven't read that one, so I can't judge. But The Green Mile is a fantastic film on its own, and it's one of the only films that actually made me cry at the end, and that does not happen a lot. But it's also one of the best faithful to the source movies I have ever seen. And not only when it came to the plot, what was really impressive in this movie was the casting and the character portrayal. I've recently reread the book once again and had the movie in mind, and when he talks about the warden, it's as if he describes James Cromwell. It's as if Doug Hutchison was born to play Percy. David Morse was perfect as Brutal, and Sam Rockwell was a perfect Wild Bill. And don't get me started on Michael Clarke Duncan as John Coffey. Fantastic. But to cut a long story short, The Green Mile is a fantastic book. It's an amazing film. It's great comparing to the source and highly recommended. For the next book, I also want to mention a movie that is on its own considered pretty much a work of art, and I mentioned the book in my Halloween video. This is The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris, and the movie was directed by Jonathan Demme, or Demme, I'm not sure, there's an E at the end. But anyway, there's a reason why this movie is still so famous and considered as such a fantastic horror thriller. It's incredibly accurate comparing to the book, but there is one bit that was in the book and they decided to take out from the movie, and that is the relationship between Clarice and her boss, Crawford. The writers smartly decided this will not fit in the movie and decided to take that out. But they also put some thought into it. They knew that taking an important bit out would leave plot holes, and they managed to cover them cleverly. And that was really impressive for me when you consider it a movie adaptation of a book. Also, I would just like to mention the movie's amazing ability to tell you in a single frame exactly what's going on. The visual storytelling in this movie is fantastic. Just think, at the beginning of the movie, there are, 2 seconds where you see Clarice enters an elevator filled with men with different color uniform than her, and all of them much, much taller. In these 2 seconds, you see enough to tell you of the misogynistic and even feministic themes in this movie. The next movie might surprise you, but I think it deserves a place in here, and that's Steven Spielberg's adaptation of Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. First of all, that movie was awesome. It's definitely a childhood favorite. And it's kids friendly, although as a kid parts of this movie really scared me. But it's a great watch for the entire family. The book, however, is purely for adults, and that's what I like so much about this film. They saw a potential for some sort of a genre change and went with it, but did it very, very well. In the book, you have tons of sciencey stuff, but there's always some dumb civilian who doesn't understand it, and they have to simplify it for him so he'll be able to understand. In the movie, they simplified it even more so in order to make it kids-friendly. But at that time, kids grew up watching shows like Beakman's World, so they were already tuned in for receiving information and could understand stuff. Okay, the next one is a classic, and a book that I recently repurchased and shared with you in my recent Talia haul. And the movie is 1974's version of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, which was directed by Sidney Lumet. Let me just share with you some of the cast in this movie. Sean Connery, Vanessa Redgrave, Lauren Bacall, Michael York, Anthony Perkins, and Ingrid Bergman. How can a movie with such cast can be bad? But seriously, if you've seen previous videos, you know that I am a huge Agatha Christie fan. Murder on the Orient Express is definitely one of my favorite of hers, and in my opinion, one of the best detective books ever written. So what's so special about this movie? Well, it's brilliant. It's accurate, first of all, even though they did something there that I never understood why films do. They changed a character's name. The butler was called Masterman in the book, and it was called Beddoes in the film. Oh, and by the way, it was played by John Gielgud. But despite this annoying name change, the movie was brilliant, and considering that it entirely takes place on one set, a train, it's really impressive that they managed to make it still very interesting and very thrilling. Also, there's a bit in the end where the detective takes everyone involved and just reveal everything to them, how it happened, ties all the loose ends, and At that point I get all shivery and goosebumpy, and I call it the Agatha Christie effect, and that definitely happened in this movie. I've seen it a million times and it still manages to affect me. It's a fantastic movie and a wonderful book. Okay, the last one on this list is not of the most accurate adaptations. Actually, the only similarities between the original and the movies are some of the characters and the ghost that's haunting them. This is the short story Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, and this story, or even urban legend if you will, has got so many adaptations. Some of them are animated, there was even a TV series which was okay at best, but the one I'm choosing for this list is the 1999 version directed by Tim Burton. Now, before you dislike this video and unsubscribe, let me just tell you why I chose this movie for this list. The original Sleepy Hollow story is about a small town being haunted by a ghost of a headless horseman, and it focuses on a schoolteacher named Ichabod Crane, who's very feminine and weird and keeps looking for food, and it's not like he's after the ghost or anything like that. And honestly, I don't even remember how it ends. I got so bored from the story. I do have a lot of respect for this time, for this genre, for Washington Irving. I read Rip Van Winkle, another story of his. I thought it was much better and much more interesting. And someone decided to make the most of it by creating a movie that changes completely the genre and turning it from this fantasy ghost story to a detective fantasy horror mystery. They had me in Johnny Depp. No, wait, they had me in detective. Guys, I loved Sleepy Hollow. I watched this movie like 100 times, even though the first time I saw it was in cinema. I was 12. I hated it because it scared the crap out of me. But after a few years and giving it some thought and doing a school paper about it, I realized how great it was, and I stopped being afraid of Christopher Walken. Sure, it's about a ghost that kills people, but it's also a great detective story. It's also about fear. It's about our fears from death, from the unknown, fear of disfigurement, fear of scientific progress, and mostly the paralyzing fear that the religious hypocrites in this movie has toward anything that can be remotely considered as supernatural. And moreover, it's entertaining. This movie is scary and everything, but it's also very funny. So those were my top 5 movies, and I'm pretty sure you guys had a different point of view, and I want to hear what you think. So write down in the comments below, which was your greatest disappointment when it came to a movie based on a book? Or on the other hand, which movie managed to pleasantly surprise you when it came to an adaptation? So write down what you think, like this video, subscribe to my channel if you dare, and I will see you in my next video.